Alrighty, everyone. I just want to make a very quick video because I have to go headed to church this morning. But I did some devotionals this morning and I wanted to talk about this. I ended up talking with a friend of mine on this couch. It's actually his house. And we got into a very strong discussion, and I think strong in agreement kind of a discussion about the church and the culture of the church, and just a lot of things that came up I think is very important, and it's something that we need to address. So I'm going to address it and we're going to talk about it, and we'll see where it goes, right? So, all right, I don't have much time. So, okay, I was reading in Proverbs 17, because today's the 17th of November. And I would encourage all of you guys, if you're not doing this already, there's 31 chapters of Proverbs, and there's 30 to 31 days in every month, except February, obviously. So you can go through all of Proverbs in 1 month, every month. And I would encourage you to do that. I have been trying to do that. I haven't been extremely consistent every day, but I'm working on that. I would encourage you guys to try it for a bit. And it's like Proverbs is it's book of wisdoms, right? And so it's a book of wisdom. And so every time you read something, because it's the living word, you'll learn something new, and the Lord will reveal some new things to you, and you can always go deeper into it. And so I was reading 17, and it specifically is like the contrast of the upright and the wicked. I'm doing this because it's the heading of the chapter. And I'm just going to read some of the verses that got highlighted to me. I would read the whole thing, but should I read the whole thing? I'm kind of tight on time, so I think I'm just going to talk about the ones that stood out to me. Okay, encourage you to read the whole thing, but I underlined a bunch of stuff. So I'll read all the ones that I underlined, and then we'll see where the Lord takes us today. Okay, the first one I underlined was 17 verse 2. A servant who acts wisely will rule over a son who acts shamefully, and will share in the inheritance among brothers. I highlighted that because I was like, you know those iconic movies? There's a movie that it's called, oh my gosh, I can't remember. It's the one where they're like, there's a whole family of really rich people, and then there's a crime that took place, and they're wondering what's that movie called? They made it like kind of very old school, modern, but it was like the dad died, and there's a crime that took place, and the detective is Daniel Craig, and he's there, and he's like trying to figure out what the problem is. So he's interviewing each of the family members to figure out what actually happened, so that he can answer these questions. And then turns out at the end, spoiler alert, I mean, I don't even know, we can't remember the name of the thing. But anyway, so I think it was like, Knives Out. It's called Knives Out. But in that movie, at the end, you basically, the inheritance of that father's money, which is basically what's been funding the entire family and the individual people of the family, the inheritance is going to the maid that was not only the maid, but like the caregiver of the father that passed away. And there's a whole story along with that, but she ends up inheriting the entire abundance and the entire like amount of everything that the father owned, including all of the revenue and everything. I think including the house too, which is crazy. But it's so interesting that that concept, like, it happens in several different movies that I've seen, but like that concept apparently is biblical, because in Proverbs 17 verse 2 it says, a servant who acts wisely, a servant who acts wisely will rule over a son who acts shamefully, and will share in the inheritance among brothers. So they will actually share the inheritance of the brothers, which is crazy. So I just found that very interesting today. Another part was in verse 5, it says, one who mocks the poor taunts his maker. And maker is capitalized, so I'm guessing is the creator. Well, I know it's the creator. So when you taunt the poor, when you make fun of the poor, you're actually like, when you mock the poor, you're actually taunting, you're making fun of the maker. You're making fun of God. You're actually mocking God. One who rejoices at disaster will not go unpunished. Someone who causes disaster will face punishment in some sort, probably from the Lord, because you are literally mocking the Lord. So those who are seeking after war, those who are seeking after anger and strife and battle and like what am I thinking about? Like a argument, you know, those that are seeking to pull out a bad side of somebody, it's causing disaster. And that can be as small as someone who like just loves drama and likes to create drama. And even though they may not be like intentionally, I'm going to create drama, but I feel like they are seeking to cause disaster by saying things intentionally that doesn't need to be said, right? And so just being in tune with even the specific things that you're saying or that you're doing around people that can cause disaster within an organization, within a community, that might be disruptive, that's unnecessary. If you're seeking that, you will not. And then if you rejoice in that, like if you're strategizing how to do that, you're probably rejoicing in that, you're probably enjoying it, and you will not go unpunished. So just make sure that like that's kind of scripture too. Okay. Another thing. Oh, this is what we like really talked about, and so I'm going to talk about it. But actually, I'm going to come back to that because I have other things I want to talk about first. It says in verse 13, one who returns evil for good, evil will not depart from his house. So that's pretty self-explanatory. Obviously, if you're like exchanging evil things for good things, then you're opening a door into your life for more evil things to come into your life. So it literally says, one who returns evil for good, evil will not depart from his house. So you're opening the door for evil things to come into your house. Self-explanatory. Just make sure you know what you're opening your doors to. Make sure it's not evil, even if it's the smallest things. Like recently it's been coming up more. I've been very in tune with this, but like even shows and movies like Harry Potter, for example, is full of witchcraft, and it's like worshiping witchcraft basically, because it really is acknowledging that it's a real thing. It's teaching actual spells, like it's going deep into that world of witchcraft, which then gets you to like start to study it, and then it gets you to be enchanted by it, and then you're starting to like practice it, and it's like it really gets you into this place of evil, which I think most of the world, even in the Christian world, people won't say that Harry Potter is a bad thing, but I think it's because most of them are naive to the fact that witchcraft within Harry Potter is very real, and it's like things that are actually happening and taking place in the world, and a lot of people don't believe that that's real, and so then they end up practicing it, and then they don't recognize the repercussions and the doors that they're opening within it. And so it's just like, it's a small thing that culturally is very accepted, and within the church body, a lot of the church body, it's very accepted, and I've even heard pastors like referencing different spells from it, which in their sermons, which I'm like, oh, that's not the best thing to do, because you're literally encouraging the body to watch it, which I get it. Like there's ways to redeem that, and there's ways to find revelation from it. But I think if you're not intentionally watching with an awareness that this stuff is real, and this stuff can be opening doors to allowing Satan to inhabit in places in your life, And if you're not intentionally aware about those things, then it can very much happen without you knowing that, and that can cause evil to dwell in your house. Evil to not depart from your house. So anyways, something to be aware about. In verse 15, it says, one who justifies the wicked and one who condemns the righteous, both of them alike are an abomination to the Lord. So basically, if you're trying to justify the wicked, which honestly, going back to the Harry Potter example, I think a lot of people do try to justify the show and justify witchcraft in general, which I think a lot of it is justifying in a naive point of view, or in a point of view that's like, this is not real and so it's okay, or like it can be redeemed, or like there's a lot of things that's said, and I guess this is not the best example because it's such a highly known thing and it can be very controversial, and I can get very big like contrast attacks from this, and I don't really I'm not seeking that, and I'm not trying to call anything out, but my point, I guess, is like there are little things in your life that you're not aware of, that you're doing, that may not be considered wicked in the world's eyes, but it is very much wicked in the godly eyes, like in the spiritual eyes, because there's like 90%, probably more than 90% of what we actually are receiving and experiencing is on a spiritual level versus a physical level, and we believe it's physical because we're unaware of the spiritual, and we can't see, or we can't necessarily like understand the repercussions of the spiritual realm. But everything happens in the spiritual realm, and then it happens in the physical realm, right? What's bound on earth is bound, what's bound in heaven is bound on earth. What's loose in heaven is loose on earth. Like it has to be done in heaven in a spiritual realm, and then it affects the physical realm. And so there's a lot of things that are actually wicked, that are not good, that we don't understand or don't believe, and then we're trying to justify that it's good, which is in the same sentence with people that are condemning the righteous. So if you're talking badly about a church pastor, or if you're talking badly about another minister, even if these people have done something wrong, if you're condemning them with the intention of condemning, then it says they are an abomination to the Lord. So just watch what you're saying, because it both has to do with your heart posture, but it also has to do with the words that come out of your mouth. So make sure you're very in tune, intentional with the Lord about what you're saying, what you're doing, and where your heart posture is when it comes to things like this, because it's dangerous territory, and it literally can be an abomination to the Lord. It's not light. It's not a light thing to do or to talk about. Okay, that's not even the things I want to talk about. What I really want to talk about is this is going longer than I wanted, and I probably should have made different videos of this, but I just read all this today, so I want to talk about it. Verse 10, it says, a rebuke goes deeper into one who has understanding than 100 blows into a fool. Okay, that's also not what I want to talk about. Okay, well, I mean, that's pretty self-explanatory. A rebuke goes deeper into the one who has understanding. So basically, if you don't understand why you're being rebuked, then it doesn't go as deep, right? So you have to understand what you're being rebuked by. If you understand that you've actually done something wrong, and then you get rebuked, then it like goes deeper because you've already found like a conviction in yourself. And then so when they're rebuking you, it definitely goes into your soul like much, much deeper, because you get a greater because you already had a greater understanding of why you were being rebuked. Versus if you're being rebuked and you're like, I have no idea why I'm being rebuked, then it's obviously not going to go deeper unless you have the understanding of why you're getting rebuked. Makes sense. Oh my gosh, there's so many things I can talk about today. Lord is good. Oh my gosh. Definitely read it and go deeper with it on a personal level so that you can find your own conviction, or you can find your own revelations on things that's going on in your life and your journey with the Lord. Verse 11. This is really what I wanted to talk about today. Maybe we'll go deeper on all of these things another day because I'm talking really, really fast, I think. But you can always slow down the video and watch it slower if you want to, or you can watch it multiple times. Okay, verse 11, it says, a rebellious person seeks only evil, so a cruel messenger will be sent against him. It says a rebellious person seeks only evil. Okay, seeks only evil. So then the word rebellious really stood out to me. That's really what I wanted to talk about today. The word rebellious really stood out to me. And there's another scripture here in 1 Samuel 15, I think 23. It says, for rebellion is as reprehensible as a sin of divination. It says divination here, but a lot of other translations, the divination word, it says witchcraft. So basically it's saying rebellious behavior is as witchcraft. So then my friend and I this morning, we were talking about the culture of this world. We were talking about, especially in America, what's happening. We're talking about how it's so accepted within the church, the rebellious behavior. I served as a youth minister at a church in the past, and we had some students that were behaving like inappropriately, and the adults that were there were like, oh, just let them be, like they're just teenagers, like it's okay for them to be rebellious, like that's who they are, that's what they are. And I was a little bit shocked by that, because I was like, that doesn't justify that's correct. Like that's actually not good. We have to correct them in their rebellious behavior, and so I was talking that with my friend, because I was like, I rebelled as a child heavily. But in my mind, I rebelled as like intentionally to rebel. And I didn't actually do anything as far as like sinning in my rebellion. Well, later on in my years I did. But what I'm specifically talking about was like in China. I grew up in China. I like snuck out of the house at night once. And then I like bought a beer, because there's no drinking age in China. I bought a beer and I like sipped on it, and I realized how beer tasted really bad at the time because I was young, and I threw it away. But it was like the act of trying to rebel for the sake of rebelling. It wasn't even like I like committed a crime or broke or like committed sin from my rebellion, but it was the act of rebellion that I think was the sin in the moment. And I was talking to my friend, and he was like, well, I think a lot of rebellion comes from an exploration of like your identity, an exploration of your journey and your walk and your life and your maturity. I was like, yeah, that's true, but we also, I think the church specifically, like, and then we talked about the analogy of like, if the fire on the stove is going to burn you, right? The church has created it so that we won't burn ourselves. Therefore, they created a rule before burning yourself to not touch the stove, to not start the stove, right? And so then that became a rule, and to protect us from burning ourselves, which is the sin, right? Burning ourselves is a sin, is the example. So in order to not sin, they created this boundary, this rule, to protect us from doing that. So another example was like dating. Dating is not a sin, but dating often leads into possible sinful activities, right? So then in the church, they just said no dating, versus giving people an understanding of why not to date. And because of this lack of understanding, the students or the children or people gain this curiosity of like, well, I want to know why I'm not allowed to do this. And in that curiosity, the enemy easily comes in and is like, okay, well, you can rebel against it and see what happens. And so then they then break the rule of the boundary that was set from our elders or our authorities to then try something. And although that rule of no dating was not a sin, the breaking of the disobedience and the not honoring, like the dishonoring of our superior, of our spiritual authority, like that in and of itself is a sin. Like that is breaking like a crucial principle in the Bible, right? And so then it causes us to then sin, and then it causes us to then sin into like burning your hand on the stove or getting into more sexual activity with the person you're dating, right? And so, but what happens in the church is because we create these boundaries, and it goes so far to becoming a very religious structure, and oftentimes elders who create those structures, it's like a rule that's been passed down from generation to generation with no knowledge or with no explanation of why they've created it, that it just becomes a generational thing. And then people like us, or people like me who's like curious as to why they've created that, I'm not getting an answer or an understanding or knowledge of why they've done that. So then I end up breaking those rules, and that causes my rebellious behavior to then either like it actually causes people to either fully submit into what they say and continue this continue this traditional like religious organization construct, or it causes people to fully rebel against it because they're hurt by it, because they feel like there's too much control. They rebel against it, or they're traumatized by it, and then they like just live this rebellious lifestyle, which according to the Bible it says is witchcraft. Like I'm talking so much very fast, and I don't know if this is like understandable, but there's so much that takes place within the church. And I'm just using a church as an example. Like this can be anything. It can be a household, it can be your school, it can be the church, it can be any organization that you're a part of, but there are like rules that are set in place because of, not because it's breaking the actual law, but it's to protect us from breaking the actual law, right? And the law, I'm just saying, as principles in the Bible. But then that's the curiosity that we then get, that then the enemy uses to deceive us, to then either break the rules or to just submit into this like not fully understanding concept. And in the Bible, it actually also says wisdom is in the presence of one who has understanding. So this means, and this is verse 24, but it says wisdom is in the presence of those who have understanding, meaning if you don't have an understanding of why you're being rebellious, or why they're having these rules placed in front of you, then it can cause you to then want to rebel. It can cause you to then want to find out why, because you don't have an understanding, therefore you don't have wisdom. It's like this like circular thing that's been passed on for generations. And because most parents or most elders don't have that understanding, but they're just submitted unto the structure, so then they're passing it on to their kids, and then they're like, you can't date. And then if the kid's like, why can't I date? And they're wanting to have understanding, the parents don't understand why they can't date because they've never done the rebellious thing with that specific topic. So then they're like, oh shoot, I actually don't know. And a lot of times, instead of saying, you're right, let's talk about it, they say, no, I'm your parent, I know you, I know better than you, you will listen to me. Because they get into an insecure place, and then they step into a control state when the kid is trying to find understanding to gain wisdom on how to proceed with why there is that rule in place of no dating. Does that make sense? I think this is like a really big topic, and it like got us talking about this whole thing because it's a huge cycle. And I think a lot of people, and then we even got into the concept of like, America is this like fight for freedom, fight for our rights, fight for our voices kind of a nation, and we're the leading force of all these things. And the Lord has blessed America so much, but then Satan is also utilizing this concept of freedom, this concept of rights and voices, to then have people specifically rebel against what's written in the Bible. Specifically rebel against what's written in the Bible. And use the concept of this is freedom, this is rights, this is my voice, and I'm going to rebel against the Bible, which is witchcraft. Does any of this make sense? I'm like trying to talk very fast, which I don't know if it's helping, but I think it makes sense in my mind. I think there's a clear point that I'm trying to make. Like, it's just an awareness. It's almost like an alert. Like, wake up. There's so many things that's very, like, right in front of our faces that we can address very quickly. In our faces, in our own lives, things that we can apply that's very biblical. And with simple questioning of what is policy to protection from sin or what is actual sin, can change the way that we even view any form of like political situation or church situation or educational situation, right? Or a family situation, any religious situation. Like, there's a lot of things that can be resolved from just that behavior. So anyways, I just wanted to talk about that mainly, and it's chapter 17, verse 11. A rebellious person seeks only evil, so a cruel messenger will be sent against him. They only seek evil. My friend originally was saying, I think that's a rebellious behavior against God directly, which I was like, yes, but it's done in a very sneaky way that we won't admit that it's directly against God, because we're like, actually, no, I'm just trying to find freedom. I'm just trying to find my voice and trying to find my rights. But that can be a deception that your mind is inside of, like, if that makes sense. Just being aware, being a little bit more in tune with exactly where you're at, or where your people are at. It will bring a bigger awareness. It says even the elect will be deceived, and it's things like this. It's things like this, because there are some people who whatever an authority figure will say, your mind is trained to be like, well, what else is there? And that part of the what else is there, or why is he saying that, or like, I don't want to feel controlled. That thing, like, I have that too, but I have to catch myself on how far I'm wanting to go with that, because that can easily be that rebellious process in my mind that can cause me to then dwell on that, and it can then open up doors for the enemy to come in and like take action on it and then deceive my whole thought process with that situation, which then gets me to like stay away from this elder, or stay away from this teaching, or stay away from that, when it actually is aligned with the word. Does that make sense? I hope all this makes sense. It's a lot. I think this is like 30 minutes of my time. I'm so late for church, but I just wanted to talk about this because I think it's very, very important. So anyways, just one scripture. I would encourage you to keep looking into this deeper. The concept of rebellion, I think, is such a big deal. I think it's what the Israelites dealt with the whole time in the wilderness. Their whole like history of Israelites has to do with rebellious behavior. And there's more verses specifically pertaining to rebellion, and I think it's Ezekiel 2, 5-8, Psalms 107, 9-15, Isaiah 53, verse 6, Romans 13, 1, 3, and 5. And then the one I referred to was 1 Samuel 15, 23. And then this current one was Proverbs 17, 11. So I hope that added some value, and I hope this helps you in terms of how to process or read the scripture differently. I hope that it gave you some revelation or insight in terms of what you might be doing in your life, or maybe the Lord's convicting you on something with your life, or how you can approach other people in their lives. And I just hope that they provided value. If you're still watching, thank you for watching. Thank you for listening to what I have to say. And I would really appreciate it if you like the video and you subscribe below. And I will definitely read some of your comments. If you guys have any questions or concerns, write some comments below and I'll read it. And if you think of anybody you can share this video to, you can do that also. It'll really help me out. And anyways, that is all for today. I will talk to you guys in another video. Bye.